Very much, Caherlock, and I'd also like to welcome the Minister to the House. And I was listening to my colleague Senator McSharry, and I have to say I was quite, he made some comments on the budget that I felt, were relevant, and I'm sure the Minister will answer them. But I was actually struck by his comments versus the comments of his colleague in the Dáil, who engaged in what I would call the most ridiculous rant I've ever heard in all of my life, suggesting to the older people of Ireland, that they couldn't rest easy in their beds after this government had finished with them today. Just to deal with one or two issues that were raised relating to, for example, the bereavement grant. I myself spent time as a practicing solicitor. And as your colleague pointed out, this was introduced by a Fianna Fáil government in the 1990s, when you were buying votes in each successive budget with this type of nonsense measure. Layers of an onion, one upon the next, upon the next, upon the next, with absolutely no economic rationale to support them whatsoever. For example, it is a benefit to those who inherit wealth. That's the bottom line of it. It's a benefit to those who inherit wealth. It has nothing to do with the means of the person who has died. I have administered estates where people have inherited €2 million and received a bereavement grant. So let's be realistic about what we're talking about here. And incidentally, Minister Burton has already said that any family in difficulties, their needs will be met by an exceptional needs payment. So let's stop scaring the people of Ireland with nonsense comments and get down to the real issue as to how this country takes a necessary 2.5 billion out of the economy without hurting the people who need the care the most. Thank you very much.
Without interruption, please.
Can I also say, in relation to the telephone allowance, that Minister Burton has also said that nobody in this country will be at fear or at risk because of the withdrawal of that telephone allowance. So, as I said, let's stop sending the elderly people of Ireland to bed scared tonight because Fianna Fáil couldn't come up with better critiques of this budget than that. Thank you.
You didn't watch.
I watched it. Excuse me, I have a headache from having watched it.
Good, well, I have a headache right now, so just carry on.
May I just say, on a broader tone, that this budget, I believe, comes at a critical time for this economy, and after many years of having seen successive years of taking money out of this economy, I think we are looking at the last of the austerity budgets. I think a commitment has been made by this government on that point, and I believe that we are looking at a turning point in the history of this country. And if I could quote the Tánaiste Eamon Gilmore, who said recently that we're creating 3,000 jobs a month, the economy is seeing modest but all-important growth, our national finances are largely back on track, Irish exports have now exceeded even their pre-crisis levels, and we are about to successfully exit the EU-IMF bailout.
Minister for Trade.
The challenge with this budget, let's be realistic about it, the challenge with this budget was how to tackle austerity fatigue, which is dragging the country down, while at the same time making sure that we exit the bailout appropriately and on time. Now, I don't know about you, but it's important to me that this country gets its sovereignty back. It's important to me that this time next year, Fine Gael and Labour are actually engaging in a dispute over social democratic politics, perhaps, versus maybe the politics of Fine Gael and what they would like to spend money on, rather than dancing to the tune of the Troika. The bottom line of it is, we have had a challenge in this budget to protect the most vulnerable while continuing to grow the Irish economy. This budget was a balancing act, and it was a hard ask. How do we take our 2.5 billion without damaging modest growth? How do we get a return to the markets? How can we make sure that we don't hurt people who are most in need? And you know, it is a hard ask, and I believe that this budget has succeeded in achieving it. With regard to the budget itself, let's not forget, and we are inclined to forget, and in fact, I haven't heard mention of this so far today on this side of the House, that there was a major discussion as to whether it was going to be 3.1 million or 2.5 million. And I'd like to claim, if you don't mind, Minister, that as a Labour Party win. And I think it's very important not to forget that without that lowering of the, it's 2.5. Without that lowering, we would have had to have found 400 million extra 400 million extra in expenditure savings.
Sorry, Senator Hayden, without interruption.
Yeah. 400 million extra in expenditure savings. Let us not forget, for every €1 spent on social welfare in this country, it matters €7 to the domestic economy. €7 to the domestic economy. That is a very important statistic. There are a lot of people sitting at home today in this country, who will be relieved that there are no increases in the universal social payment, there are no social charge, that there is no increases in the significant VAT rates, that there is no increase on excise duty on petrol, diesel and home heating oil as we face into another winter. You know, none of these points have been made by the opposition, I might add. What's more, and it has been mentioned, we've protected the 9% on the tourism sector, which has generated 15,000 jobs to date. You know, there has been an awful lot, there's been a lot forgotten to be mentioned on that side of the House, I might say. Now, can I also say that there were no cuts to child benefit. There were no cuts to child benefit. Sorry, were there additional cuts to child benefit this year? No, there were not. No, there were not. There have been no cuts to important sports, such as rent supplement, other than the €5 per couple per week. A lot has been forgotten on that side of the House. A lot has been forgotten on that side of the House. Now, I'd just like to spend my remaining few minutes focusing on the positives around this budget. How many?
1.5.
Oh, good Lord. I'd particularly like to welcome the fact that there have been no cuts to the homelessness budget and the commitment that this government has made. I would also like to welcome very much the incentives that there are to the construction sector. We have gone from an economy that had 20% engaged in the construction sector, 20% of its GNP, down to just between 6 and 7%. 1 in 4 people formerly working in the construction sector are now on the dole. That's the reality of it. It is perhaps, in my opinion, one of the most progressive measures that have been taken in this particular budget. Can I also say that I very much welcome the commitments to the engagement with private investment in the homeless area. I very much also welcome the initiatives around the VAT credit that those who engage in home improvements can access. And can I also make the point, because a lot of this has been forgotten, that this budget has recognised for the first time, I think, that we are facing a housing supply issue in this country. And I think it's a very, very important issue to raise. And the commitment that NAMA will find 4,500 additional units in the Dublin region, a region that is actually on the cusp of a serious housing crisis. Could I just say, perhaps to conclude, that obviously going forward, and being a Social Democrat myself, there are issues that I would like to see addressed in the next budget. I am concerned that we did not increase the level of capital gains tax or capital acquisitions tax. I think it is ultimately very unfair that somebody who works an additional hour in a supermarket pays a higher rate of tax than somebody, for the sake of argument, who inherits wealth or who engage in speculation on the stock exchange. And I think our tax system has to be more progressive, and I would like to see that in any forthcoming budget.
Thank you. Your time is up.
Is it? Well, can I just conclude then by saying, on a final note, that I very much welcome a small and perhaps unnoticed measure in the budget, and that relates to the Magdalen laundry survivors. I am very, very glad that this government will not be taxing the payments to the Magdalen laundry survivors, and I very much thank the government for that.
Thank you very much, Senator. Thank you.